Hey everyone, welcome back to Strange Minds 6. And today we are going to be reading Chapter 8 of Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. And we are actually going to get into, will Zero be okay? Will he be able to make it to Jack's side in time? Or will the monster put him to sleep? Will Sally escape to any other town? Well, we'll find out now. Please hit that like if you haven't yet, and subscribe if you're not already. And to hear the previous chapters, you can easily go ahead and go into the playlist that I've created for you and listen to the chapters up until now. Now, let's get into it, shall we? Chapter 8. The woods are oddly still. No wind, no morning owls crying from the treetops. The moon cuts a long way through the spiny forest, and I follow the path until I reach the familiar grove of trees. Not knowing where else to go, where to hide, I sink down onto the dry ground. In a stretch of shadows, my knee has suffered 2 torn stitches from the fall, and I brace my leg with both hands, then yank it back around, so my foot is facing forward before I quickly stitch the seam back together while my eyes dart up the path, watching for the creature, listening for his unnatural soothing song echoing through the forest, using my teeth to snap the end of the thread, then scramble to my feet, testing out the leg. It was a hasty mending, but it'll have to do. I survey the grove of trees, everything just as it was before. But I move past it, deeper into the woods, remembering the way to the wall of briars that concealed the newly discovered tree, the unknown tree. Perhaps it will be safe. A safe place to hide, maybe? Away from the worn path that cuts through the forest. But when I reach the lone tree, the air escapes my throat. The moon-carved doorway into the tree is wide open. The dark hole, like a child's yawning mouth. I never closed the door. I left it open. The cold realization slams into my stomach. When I found the door, I'd been distracted, trying to retrieve my torn arm from Zero's mouth as he fled the woods, racing after him back to the cemetery. My mind tumbles against another thought, not wanting it to be true. Maybe it's a coincidence the door was open and the bearded man creature who was putting everyone in Halloween Town asleep. I want to believe these two things aren't connected, that it's not my fault. But the twisting in my knotted stomach and the base of my throat tells me that it is. I have let something out into our town. I did this. I step forward quickly and slam the little door, afraid of what else might be waiting on the other side. I gathered dead branches and broken limbs from the forest floor, securing them across the doorway, making a hastily barricade, a way to keep out any other creatures that might slither or creep or crawl through. The woods feel too quiet, the darkness heavy, guilt crashes through me like a guillotine, cutting down to the bone. There is no one else to blame, no one to unleash my anger upon for feeling so foolish and stupid. I have left the door open into some unknown world and unleashed a creature into Halloween Town. I pick up the thread on my wrist as another thought begins to fester in my mind. The aloneness rotting in my chest, taking on a new meaning, clear and undeniable. There is no one else to undo what has been done. No one left but me. With Halloween less than 2 weeks away, it's not only the residents of Halloween Town who I have doomed, but all of Halloween. If I don't find a way to wake the others, there will be no pumpkins burning bright on doorsteps, no ghosts rattling chains from children's bedroom closets, no tricks unleashed on All Hallows Eve night. Not this year, not ever. This is my fault. With my head pulsing, my knee still a little off-centered, I walk the several yards back to the original grove of 7 trees. I stand in the middle, turning in a circle. I know I can't stay here. I can't risk the creature finding me, putting me to sleep. I narrowly escaped him once before. I might not be so lucky again. And maybe there will be someone in the other holidays who will know how to stop the bearded man with sand sifting from his pockets. I think back to Valentine's Town, our honeymoon, only days ago, and I wonder if Ruby Valentino will know how to send him back to where he came from. Surely she will have some queenly trick or simple remedy to set things right. I open the red-hearted doorway that leads to Valentine's Town, my fingers trembling. I remember the hesitation I felt only days ago. I didn't want to leave Halloween Town. I was afraid to venture into the world I didn't know. But when Jack folded his cold fingers around mine, I knew I'd go anywhere with him. Now I have to do this on my own. I suck in a long, shaky breath, fear and courage stewing together inside me, making me lightheaded, but I force myself to extend my crooked leg through the doorway and then my arms before tumbling headfirst into Valentine's Town. There is nothing graceful about the descent into a new realm. Its pinwheeling ribbons of starlight and little paper white hearts. But when I land in Valentine's Town, I don't take time to admire the heart-shaped trees and sponge sugary skies. I start immediately towards the town's border, but I sense the strangeness in the air as soon as I step through the iron gate and hurry down the cobblestone street. The center of town at the Cupid's Fountain is unnaturally quiet. The scent of melted chocolate and candy wax dripping from fingertips is all gone. The air smells flat, sugarless, like watered down cake batter left to spoil on the kitchen counter. I start toward the Lovebird Inn, but I don't even make it a block before I see the first plump, rosy-cheeked woman asleep in a doorway, head canted to one side, a dozen tiny heart-shaped candies stone on the ground by her hand. The words, "My honey bee and little love," are stamped into them. "Ma'am?" I say to the woman. But I already know. I sense she won't wake. Just like the residents of Halloween Town, she too has been cast into the odd, otherworldly kind of slumber. Farther up the street, I find others passed out at a cafe, hot chocolates left cold beside their limp fingers, heads slumped against shoulders, eyes sunk closed, babies dozing in their strollers while their parents lie on the cobblestone sidewalk, also fast asleep. I find a cluster of cupids resting near the lazy chocolate river, like muttered sounds slipping from the cherry lips. They look like tiny confections, babies who've eaten too many sweets, wings gone still against their backs, and every one of them is covered in a soft dusting of white sand. It's scattered across the streets, stuck in the window frames and doorways and beneath fingernails. It's everywhere. I pass by delicateness where candied gingers, marzipans, almonds, and lemon macaroons have been left in windowsills to rot in the morning sunlight. At last I discover Ruby Valentino asleep in the front garden of what must be her home. Hedge roses of petunias bloom all around her. It's a well-tended garden. Not a single bleeding heart flower in sight, and behind it stands a frosted pink house, tall and narrow, like high-heeled shoes. She still looks just as glossy and queenly as she did awake, but now her lips sputter with each exhale, and I bend down to touch her hand softly, where she's lying in the flattened grass, a half-eaten chocolate truffle with butterscotch swirls a few inches from her lifeless fingertips. "Ruby?" I whisper, hoping against all reason that she might wink a sleepy eye up at me and magically stir awake. I place my other hand on her shoulder and rock her gently, saying her name louder several more times, my tone growing more frantically, more afraid. My echo voice goes across Valentine's Town, up to the empty streets with no other sounds to break it apart, and the echo sends a spike of cold down my tailbone. Ruby's mouth hangs open, and I lower her back down to the grass, letting her sleep. Valentine's Town is lost to a deep slumber, and I'm afraid and starting to wonder if I'm the last one still awake anywhere. Chapter 9. I hurry through the gates of Valentine's Town, hating the silence, the stilled air, and back into the shiny rose-tinted forest. I think of Jack asleep in our bed, Zero waiting at his side, and I know I need to travel to the other holidays. I need to be sure there must be someone awake in one of the other towns, someone who can help me. At the grove of trees, I touch the other familiar door, a green tree etched into the wood. and colorful bubble ornaments painted on the limbs, a star at the top, and a ruby red present with gold ribbon set at the base of the tree. This store will take me to Christmas Town, the place Jack had visited several times. Maybe Sandy Claus will be able to help me, the cheerful, elven-like man who I once saved from Oogie Boogie. I pull open the doorway and let the cold snow dust wind pull me inside. Jack has talked of Christmas Town many times. The layer of soft snow, the gingerbread house where Sandy Claus lives, the bustling town folks preparing for their holiday. But when I make my way into the town, lit by strings of tiny, colorful lights, several small cottages lining the snowy streets, I find it unusually quiet, especially with Christmas a little more than 2 months away. I listen for the sing-song of voices for the elves Jack described to me one night before we were married, when we sat beside the fireplace in his room, drinking a slug-nettle tea as he told me stories of the other towns. His eyes seemed lit from within. Sorry if you hear the plane, you guys. I hope you guys don't mind it, but let's get back to this. His eyes seemed lit from within, even brighter than the firelight at his hands waved in the air to describe every detail. He loved the other holiday towns, couldn't wait to share each one with me, but now I'm starting to worry he won't get the chance. Now I'm traveling to the other holidays on my own without him. Sandy Claus, I call out, peering up each empty snowy street. At last I come to a rather large gingerbread house at the far end of town. I knock on the rounded door, decorated with white frosting and green tinsel out on it, but there's no answer. Cautiously, I push the door open and step inside. Across the living room, seated in an overstuffed chair beside the fireplace. The fire is still crackling, hazelnuts roasting in a pot over the flames, and a cup of cocoa with a tiny bobbing marshmallow on the table beside him is Sandy Claus, asleep. He looks rather peaceful, in fact, snoring quietly, mumbling to himself, a sprig of mistletoe hanging above him. I could easily be fooled into thinking he's simply taking a quick afternoon nap, except when I touch his hand and say his name, he doesn't startle awake. Instead, a cloud of sand spills from this thick red coat on the floor. I back away from him, wiping my fingertips across my dress, the same chill I felt in Valentine's Town, clambering down my skin, and I slip back out through the doorway into the snowy cold. I enter a large gingerbread workshop. A few yards away, 3 dozen tiny elves with bells in their hair and ribbons around their wrists, just like Jack described, are also asleep. They assemble of presents at a standstill, spun ribbons lying in heaps on the floor at their feet, no song whistling from their lips while they work. I close the door to the workshop and rush back toward the forest. I turn in a circle at the center of the grove of trees in Christmas Town, deciding. My eyes settle on the giant egg painted in pastel hues of peach and spring sky blue. I remember the Easter bunny, whom Locke Shock and Barrow accidentally kidnapped last winter. He seemed harmless enough, a creature who hopefully comes from a realm with nothing to fear. So, I stepped forward and touched the shiny doorknob, my pulse quickening in my throat, and I pull open the door, stepping into the dark of the tree. Pinwheeling through the doorway, I land in the warm, spring-like forest of Eastertown, but beneath my palms, the grass feels all wrong, woven and papery, not like grass at all. It even has a strange pastel hue, as if it's been dyed using green clovers or swamp water, and it crunches beneath my black shoes as I walk up the meadow path toward Eastertown. The air is muted and quiet, and my eyes scan the meadow for signs of anyone awake, but instead I find something else, nestled among the tall grass and tucked along the squat wooden fence. The borders the path, countless small eggs, all painted in shades of pastel, like the doorway. They sit perched in the knobs of several oak trees and along a border of blooming tulips, as if they've been hidden and now are waiting to be found, plucked from the ground and kept as souvenirs or prizes. But I can't imagine why anyone would gather eggs of such unusual color. Surely they're poisonous? If those eggs were discovered in Halloween Town, they would certainly be some kind of malice or cruel trick waiting inside. A thought, shudder quick enters my mind. I wish Jack were here. He would know what the eggs mean. He would know if I should be afraid of this place. But I stuff down the unease and continue on my path, where the gate into Eastertown arches up toward the perfectly pale sky, looking like a braided basket with a tall looping handle interwoven with daisies and poppies and other spring flowers. This is an odd town, I think, as I pass through the gate, but I quickly realize it's hardly a town at all. There are no shops or buildings or a town square with a bubbly candy fountain, only a massive wildflower meadow with holes dug into the earth like warrens, places where rabbits make their homes. The path ends at a small gazebo, a squat wooden structure painted with yellow daisies and colorful tulips, mirroring the fields of flowers that surround it. I edge closer to the gazebo, peering inside, where low wooded tables are lined with baskets, each filled with a dozen or so eggs, and the same odd grass from the forest. Glass jars with inky water sit along a dozen circular palettes of watercolor. This must be the place where the eggs I saw along the path are painted, but there is something else inside the gazebo. A dozen rabbits are gathered together as if they clotted in the center of the open-air structure, terrified before being overcome by a cloud of sand that knocked them unconscious, and lying on the white wood steps that lead up into the gazebo, as if he tried to fend off something. As it drew closer, is a single rabbit, larger than the others. His fur is buttery pink like melted strawberry ice cream, and he wears a cream white sash that reads Happy Easter. He is asleep just like all the others. My fabric chest feels tight as I sprint back up the path to the woods. A new kind of panic burning in my throat, behind my eyes. What if no one else is awake? Anywhere? At the grove of trees, I choose another door. A large feathered turkey painted into the bark tree, and before I can tell or let out the doubt and fear take root, I yank open the door and step through. The wind is cold and bitter in this town. The scent of autumn in the air, leaves turning copper and shades of sunset. They crunch under my feet as I walk, and it almost feels like home, like Halloween Town, except with a hint of snow in the air. Winter creeping closer, a later season. I follow the dirt path out of the woods toward a crude wooden sign hanging over the town gate, creaking in the wind. Thanksgiving Town, it reads. Already the air feels too still, but I pass through the gate and down into a small valley where the town sits cradled by farmland and low hills on all sides. Crops of corn and wheat and even pumpkins line the surrounding fields. My shoes kick up dust as I walk down the main street, bordered by homes made of freshly cut logs, the scent of smoke hanging in the air, coiling up from chimneys. And for a moment, I think this is a sign that someone is in this town, that someone might still be awake. But there are no voices, no stirring footsteps, no one tending to the far fields. But it's just as abnormally quiet as every other town I've visited. But at last I do see someone. A man is lying face up on the front porch of a small log house. A carved pipe rests between his fingertips, the embers extinguished, and with each exhale a soft sputter leaves his lips, making his mustache quiver. Through the open doorway behind him, I see others inside his home, seated along a wooden table as though they just sat down to dinner, except they are slumped forward in their wood chairs, foreheads pressed to plates, with bowls of soup, steaming coffee cups tipped over, forks still clutched in hand, sand at their feet. After I found the secret hidden door, after I ran to the cemetery and fell asleep beneath the pale full moon beside Spiral Hill, was the bearded man slipping through every doorway into every town, putting every resident to sleep? While I wandered through our house, feeling relief to finally be alone, savoring every quiet moment, was the creature sneaking through doorways? I did nothing while he tore through these helpless towns, blowing sand into the faces of everyone he found. A chill slinks down each of my seams. I did this. The eerie hush of this town is bone-breaking. The quiet that crept into every corner and floorboard. Nothing awake, nothing left. And I feel hollow as I hurry back into the woods, the nerve-frayed edges of my thoughts moving too quickly, cycling over and over the same idea. What if I can't find a way to wake them? What if I'm the last one? I pass a flock of wild turkeys darting through the trees, startled by my footsteps, making odd, wobbling sounds before they scurry away, quick and frightened, quick enough that they manage to avoid the creature's sand. When I reach the grove, I'm out of breath, the leaves in my chest stirring wildly, manically, like they might burst through my seams. But I have to see this through. I need to know for sure that there's no one else awake. In 4th of July town, bright exploding lights shake the dark, starless sky. But even for all the whirling, crackling noise, everyone I find is dozing quietly in their dome-shaped homes, ceilings all made of glass, to see the perpetual night sky, and not even the pinwheels of the colorful starlight erupting over the town can wake them. It's just the same as all the other towns. Sand scattered across, sleepless bodies caught in their hair, some with eyes still open, as if watching the exploding sky above. My own body shivers, vibrates, the dread becoming something else, a horrible knowing. I might be the only one left. I sprint back to the woods, legs hobbling with each stride, because when I reach the grove, I know there's only one town remaining. Chapter 10. At the grove. I step through the last remaining door, a green 4-leaf clover, etched and painted into the tree, the color of graveyard ferns. My last hope. When I step through the doorway, I find myself in a small forest, trees stunted and short, where the air smells of moss and mint. Surveying the surrounding trees, I notice several paths leading away from the grove, heading in different directions, unlike the other holiday realms, where a single path leads to the town. Here there are many. Without pathway signs or markers, I have no way to know which path is the right one. But with no time to waste, I choose a path at random and start into the woods. The path takes me along a cool rocky stream, then a hillock, and down again until at last, unexplainably, I find myself back into the grove of 7 trees, right where I started. I blow out a breath, forehead tensed, irritated. Then I start down another path because I don't have a choice. I follow it through a dense patch of hissing cattail reeds, over a rocky wall that might have once been a fence line, and then impossibly, it leads me right back to the grove, back to the beginning, as if I am caught in an endless, maddening loop. Quickly I survey the other paths, the ones I haven't taken yet, but I'm beginning to wonder if this is some kind of trick, a way to detour uninvited guests, to keep them from finding the town. The sun is still high in the sky, a wall of rain clouds in the distance, but I decide to abandon the paths altogether, instead choosing to follow the long finger-like shadows cast down by the trees. In Halloween Town, it's said that if you're ever lost, you should follow your own shadow. It will always take you where you need to go. I push my hands into the pockets of my dress, lift my chin, feeling the seam along my neck tense, and step away from the grove, making my own trail through the thick underbrush and thorny leaves. I follow my lean shadow across the ground, down a long, sloping hillside, across a grassy valley that smells of mint and hops, until through the glittery sunlight I see it, a town. Tucked into the shadow ends of the long valley, surrounded by green fields, I race through the tall grass, licking at my exposed legs, until I reach a gold-hued gate, and I tilt my head up to read the sign, St. Patrick Town. I found it. I glance down at my shadow, nodding. Then I hurry up and the narrow main street, where tiny thatched roof homes made of loam and gathered twigs crowd each side, pressed in close. Strangely, the doorways are half my size, too small for me to step inside. Instead, I crouch down and peer through glazed windows to see small kitchens with miniature tea kettles squealing, beds unmade, biscuits burning in the oven. The small glimmer of hope I felt when I found the town quickly darkens, when I find small red-bearded men and rosy-cheeked women asleep inside tiny cafes and pubs, pints undrank, green tea unsipped. I even find curly-haired babies resting in woolly, mass-made cribs. I'm too late, I say softly to myself as I reach the end of a row of tiny woodland structures, and I press my palms to my eyes to keep the tears from falling. There's no one left awake, no one who can help me. I drop my hands and squint up at the pale, glistening sky. Maybe I should return to Halloween Town, walk into the square, and wait for the creature to find me. And when he does, arms outstretched, with a wrist full of sand, I won't flinch. I won't run away. I will close my eyes and feel the cloud of sand rain down over me, letting everything go dark, nothing but the dark. I will sleep like the others, like Jack and I won't be alone anymore. Jack. At the thought of him, my unshed tears at last break over my eyelids, wet and cold, but I don't wipe them away. I let the weight of it all sink over me. The awful, cruel pain, the knowing guilt. I did this. I opened a doorway and allowed a monster into my world. Your curiosity will kill you, Dr. Finkelstein once told me. Maybe he was right, but instead of killing me, it's taken the man, the skeleton I love. The little town blurs from view, smeared by wetness, and I blink just as something darts in front of me, a flash of green, of brown velvet shoes skittering away into a narrow dirt alleyway between buildings. Someone is awake. I brush my palm over my eyes, catching a last glimpse of the figure darting into the shadows, but it takes half a second for my legs to understand what my eyes are seeing, for my body to swing itself forward, to go after the small half-sized man. He dashes beyond the borders of town, through a wall of bracken ferns and into a small glen where the grass grows tall, and a winding stream churns over smooth river stones. I'm out of breath when I finally catch up to him, the tears dried against my cheekbones, but the tiny man doesn't seem to notice me. He climbs atop a boulder, looking out over the blades of grass. "Hello?" I say softly, my voice a rasp, my eyes struggling to believe that he's real and awake. "Have you seen it?" he calls back, not even looking at me, unfussed by my sudden, out of nowhere appearance. He holds a hand above his eyes, scanning the glen. I step closer to him through the wavy ferns and tall grass. "Seen what?" "The rainbow," he answers brusquely, his tone thick with annoyance. "It was just here. Now it's gone." I glance out over the glen. The air has a hint of rain to it, of dampness, and everything smells rich like soil, but I see no sign of a rainbow. "Why are you looking for a rainbow?" The little man turns his gaze to me for the first time, and I see that his eyes are a golden color, his coiled beard gleaming copper red. In the sunlight, "I'm not looking for the rainbow," he huffs, impatient. "I'm looking for the pot at the end of it." I feel the seams of the corners of my mouth pull together, confused. I feel the seams at the corner of my mouth pull together, confused. His whole town is asleep, and yet he's worried about the location of some rainbow? He shakes his head and hops down from the boulder, light and quick, feet landing in the soft soil. I hid the pot somewhere in this glen, and now I can't find it. He scratches at his tightly coiled beard, turning one side of his mouth upward as if searching the lost places of his mind. "The rainbow will show me where I left it." "What's in the pot?" His eyes cast up to me, shivering in the damp sunlight. "My gold, of course." He says it like I should already know, as if it were obvious. He reminds me of Ruby Valentino, how she assumed I would know about Cupids and the burdens of being queen. But so far I've found these other towns entirely foreign and strange, with people and customs that make no sense to me. "I haven't seen a rainbow," I answer, lifting my chin, "but I found you, and you're the only person still awake." The little man takes off his hat and smooths down the cowlick at the side of his small head, but his curly red hair just springs back skyward when he lowers his hand. "I'm not a person," he corrects. "I'm a bloody leprechaun, for Pete's sake. You think you've never traveled before, never laid eyes on a charming fellow such as myself?" I clear my throat, picking at the threads along my wrist. "My apologies, sir." "And I'm still awake," he continues sharply, hooking his thumb into his vest pocket, "because I'm clever. And I know where to hide, so the Sandman can't catch me." "Sandman." The words clinks and rattles against my linen skull. I think of the tiny white flecks of sand covering the inhabitants of every town I visited. The Sandman. The leprechaun stuffs his hat back atop his head, over the unruly cowlick. "For a giant, you don't know much of anything, do you?" I consider telling him that I'm not a giant, but in fact a rag doll, but I suspect the point will be lost on him. "The Sandman has put everyone to sleep," the leprechaun says, tapping a finger to the side of his skull. "And now they won't wake up." I feel my dull eyes go wide, the weight in my chest dropping into my stomach. I opened a doorway with a moon carved into the front, I say, in a rush, the words stumbling out so quickly I hardly heard them myself. I didn't know what it was, but I think he... My voice breaks off again. I swallow. The Sandman came from inside of it, and now he's loose in our towns, and I need to stop him. The leprechaun stares up at me, his mouth forming a tight little frown. You opened a door into one of the ancient realms? I squeeze my hands together, then release them. A memory surfaces, an old one, from when I still lived with Dr. Finkelstein. He kept a book in his lab, the pages torn and waxy, and inside were stories, folk tales about ancient realms that had been forgotten, doorways that had been lost with time. I remember thumbing through the pages, curious about the fables told within, my eyes absorbing the words as quickly as they could. But before I could get through more than a few pages, Dr. Finkelstein snapped the book from my hands. "This book is not for you, Sally," he sneered, placing it on his lap as he wheeled away down the dark corridor of the lab. "Your time is better spent cooking me dinner than having your nose up in books." Later, when I tried to ask him about the ancient realms, he shot me a glaring look and sent me to my room. And now I have opened one. "It was an accident," I muttered, as if to convince myself, to dull the expanding pain. "But it's not just my town," I continued. "It's all the holiday towns. Everyone is asleep. You have to help me stop him." The little man makes a snort sound through his nose, like he's tiring of our conversation, of this unwanted interruption. "You let him out," he says with a sharp upturn of his mouth. "Now you have to put him back." "But I don't know how." "Neither do I." He waves his hand in the air. "The ancient realms were around long before our holidays ever existed." I shake my head at him, heat burning beside my eyes. "But we have to wake everyone up, or the human world will never have another holiday again, and I'll lose Jack, the only one I've ever loved. If we don't stop the Sandman, St. Patrick's Day won't happen either," I say, sounding desperate, a scratching at my rib cage. "And you'll be all alone here forever." The little man steps toward me, raising one of his red, scraggly eyebrows, golden eyes shimmering wildly, like I have stirred up some hidden part of him. "Then you have to go into his realm," he replies bluntly. "Into Dreamtown. Surely someone there knows how to bring the Sandman back to where he belongs." I shake my head, turning the name over in my mind. Dreamtown. The moon-carved doorway. The heady scents that emerge from the tree. They led to a place called Dreamtown? But what if there are others like him? What if I fall asleep as soon as I step through the doorway? I don't know what's on the other side. A soft wind stirs up from the trees, and a few raindrops begin to fall from the sky. "Not my problem," the little man spits. Weight collects against my eyelids again. Desperate. It's desperation and fear and doubt. "Will you come with me?" I ask. I plead. He doesn't seem at all like an agreeable traveling companion. He's short-tempered and preoccupied, but I don't want to do this alone, and I don't want to go into a town I might not return from. He lets out a curt little laugh. "I have better things to do," he replies swiftly. "I'm not going anywhere until I find my pot of gold." You can look for it when we get back, I suggested, bending low so my gaze meets his, looking him squarely in his beautiful golden eyes. I'm sure it's not going anywhere. For a moment, his feature seems to soften. A look of pity cuts into his eyes, like he actually feels sorry for me. And maybe it will be enough to convince him to come with me. Can't let this poor rag doll go wandering off into some dangerous world on her own. Better to go with her. But then his eyes flash away over my shoulder. There! He exclaims. That sneaky rainbow. In the distance, through the soft haze of raindrops, I can just make out the multicolored ribbons of light forming an arched rainbow in the sky, but the place where it meets the ground is hidden behind a clot of evergreen trees. I must be off, he says, bluntly, tipping his hat at me. He starts to turn away, then stops, scratching his beard, considering something, before bending low in the grass and plucking something from the soil. He holds it out in the palm of his hand. Good luck, giant, he says, nodding. In his palm rests a tiny green leaf. It's a 4-leaf clover, he explains with a wink, and one that's been plucked from inside St. Patrick's Town is particularly lucky. I take the green clover from his palm and hold it up to the sky, marveling at its 4 perfectly rounded leaves. It smells of soil and rain, resting delicately between my fingertips, and it looks just like the clover on the doorway into this realm. Thank you, I say to him, but when I glance up, he's already vanished into the thick green spruce trees and falling raindrops. And that, my dear friends, is where we shall leave it for today. Tune in next time. And if you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. And this is Ruby signing off.